Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Kuhn, Head of Solution Consulting at Gretel. I'll be walking through a use case where we are completing a sparse dataset that is related to 500 product listings for shoes. This is a common scenario when we're dealing with product listings because the fields are necessary for one channel are different than for other channels. And you can't just complete that with a random entry. It needs to be contextually relevant. When we're talking about a tabular data set, there is the challenge of context, which is not present within normal natural language processing. If I'm continuing a sentence or continuing a chain of thought, really I'm going in one direction. Whereas in a tabular situation, I need to have the context of that column. I also need to have the context of the other records for that specific entry in that given row. I need to be able to take that context and be able to manage that at massive enterprise scale because relational databases and sparse tables exist in the gigs and terabytes and petabytes worth of data. And I need to be able to extend this. So I need that to integrate very seamlessly into the rest of my data pipeline, be something that I can even extend using those completed sparse data sets for things like synthetic data generation. Today, I'm mostly focusing on that sparse data set and how I can make it more consumable, more useful. As I mentioned, we are dealing with product listings for shoes. So there are 7 columns that we are looking at. And in our data, there are always going to be missing columns or missing entries for certain columns. As you scroll through this, you notice that we're dropping out a different column. So the first 10 records, we've dropped out the manufacturer. Then we start dropping out the style, the color, the size. By the end of the 500 records, you'll see that we're dropping out 3 columns at the same time. So a lot of the information has been lost or has been removed from these records. And we're trying to use the Gretel Tabular LLM to give us an entry which is not just a repetition of something that has happened in that column, but instead give us something that is contextually relevant to the Gel Nimbus 23. Can you tell me a description about the Gel Nimbus 23? I don't need to know a description about the Air Force One. I need to have one that's related to that. I need a color related to that. I need information that is contextually relevant to that specific row and is going to fit the constraints of that given column. In our notebook, you'll see that we are doing exactly that. Before I use my notebook, I'm going to need my API key. So I will copy that over and then open up our notebook, which I've already run beforehand using my API key. It is going to install the Gretel client. We're going to take a look at that sparse data set, and we see that we have these not a numbers showing up for those empty records or for those sparse columns. And then we'll be connecting into the tabular LLM provided by Gretel. We're using the SDK in order to do this in a programmatic manner and be able to take this to enterprise level scale. We have a prompt that we are providing, which is pretty straightforward. We're really just saying that we want to look at the other columns and we want to get a value which is contextually relevant to those columns that are present. Then we're going ahead and running this. One of the things that you get with Gretel models is the ability to parameterize or to tune how that model is going to run. In the tabular LLM context, one of those common things that I can tune is the temperature. So this will determine how creative it is when it is coming up with something like a description. Once we have run that, we're going to be able to compare our results. We're doing that directly inside of the notebook itself. The first thing that we see is our original table, and we have all these empty values. And then when we get down to the last of the 500 records, we see that there are 3 of these columns which come in blank. Our poor Gel Nimbus, when we look at the completed table, has all of those missing fields filled back in so that we have a contextually meaningful description. We have a style and a color which is correct and relevant for that given shoe, for that given product. The benefit here is that the Gretel Tabular LLM has allowed me to maintain the context for that row, has allowed me to do that using the SDK so that I can scale this out to enterprise volumes of data and make that sparse data more useful for downstream consumption or usage. And the Gretel synthetic data platform means I can extend that and very easily operationalize that, bringing it into becoming a input for training one of our models to generate synthetic data based upon now a data set which is no longer sparse. Sparse data used to be the bane of all sorts of data science and data testing use cases. Now with Gretel Tabular LLM, you can solve that data bottleneck.